Happy Easter, everybody, and we have 2026 Brewers regular season game 9. The Brewers who win against the Royals 8-5. Kyle Harrison with the win, Chris Bubich with the loss, and Trevor McGill with the save. Top of the first, Chris Bubich will get back-to-back outs by Bryce Terang and Luis Rengifo. William Contreras will get walked, and then an RBI triple by Christian Yelich to make it 1-0 Brewers. And boys, it's time again. El Kraken out to left center, bang. I know I was kind of late on the bang, but anyways, that one is back and gone. A two-run shot by El Garrito, a.k.a. El Kraken, a.k.a. Gary Sanchez. 414 feet at 109 miles an hour. Brewers up 3-0. After that, Luis Matos would strike out to end out the inning. Bottom of the first, Kyle Harrison would throw 1-2-3. Top of the second, Chris Bubich would throw 1-2-3. Bottom of the second, Salvador Perez would be out number 1 on a lineout. Lane Thomas would get walked, and then Jack Caglione and Starling Marte would get back-to-back outs to end out the inning. Top of the third, Bryce Terang and Luis Rengifo would get back-to-back outs. William Contreras would get walked, and then Christian Yelich would strike out to end out the inning. Bottom of the third, Jonathan India would start off on a hit by pitch. Nick Lofton would strike out to be out number 1, and then a two-run home run by Michael Garcia would make it 3-2. Fly high, Bobby Wood Jr. would get walked, and then he'd get a stolen base, and then Vinny Pasquantino would hit a single, which would turn into an out. And then Salvador Perez would be out number 3 on a flyout. Top of the fourth, Gary Sanchez and Luis Matos would strike out back-to-back, and then Brandon Lockridge would get walked. An RBI double by Blake Perkins would make it 4-2, and then Joey Ortiz would strike out to end out the inning. Bottom of the fourth, Kyle Harrison would throw 1-2-3. Top of the fifth, Bryce Terang and Luis Rengifo will get back-to-back outs. William Contreras would hit a double, then Christian Yelich would be out number 3 on a groundout. Bottom of the fifth, Jonathan India would lead it off with a groundout. Nick Lofton would hit a single. Michael Garcia and Bobby Wood Jr. would get back-to-back outs to end out the inning. Top of the sixth, Nick Mears would enter the game for the Royals. He'd start by giving up a walk to Gary Sanchez, and then Luis Matos would get his first Brewers hit. After that, Nick Mears would throw 1-2-3. Bottom of the sixth, Vinny Pasquantino will be out number 1 on a pop-out. Grant Anderson would enter the game for the Brewers. He'd start by giving up a double to Salvador Perez, and then he'd get back-to-back outs with Lane Thomas and Jack Caglione to end out the inning. Top of the seventh, Matt Strahm would enter the game for the Royals. He'd start by walking Bryce Terang, and then Luis Rengifo would hit a double. A 2 RBI single by William Contreras to make it 6-2. After that, the Brewers will go 1-2-3. Bottom of the seventh, Starling Marte would lead it off with a single, then Jonathan India would get walked. Then Abner Uribe would enter the game for the Brewers. He'd start by giving up a single to former Brewer Isaac Collins, and then an RBI single by Michael Garcia would make it 6-3. The final batter that Uribe would face would be Bobby Wood Jr., and he would strike him out. Angel Serpa would enter the game for the Brewers. He'd start by giving up a 2 RBI single to Vinny Pasquantino, making it 6-5, and then Salvador Perez would be out number 2 on a flyout. Then Lane Thomas would end out the inning on a groundout. Top of the eighth, Steven Cruz would enter the game for the Royals. He'd start by walking Brandon Lockridge, and then he'd get a stolen base. Blake Perkins will be out number 1 on a strikeout. Joey Ortiz would be out number 2 on a groundout. Bryce Terang would get intentionally walked, and then he'd get a stolen base, and then Luis Rengifo would be out number 3 on a groundout. Bottom of the eighth, Jack Caglione and Starling Marte would get back-to-back outs. Jonathan India would get walked, and then Tyler Tolbert would be picked off to end out the inning. Top of the ninth, Lucas Erceg would enter the game for the Royals. He'd get the first out to William Contreras on a groundout. Christian Yelich would hit his first double of 2026, and then an RBI double by Jake Bauers would make it 7-5. Garrett Mitchell will get walked, then he'd be caught stealing, and then an RBI single by Brandon Lockridge would make it 8-5. Then to end out the top of the ninth, Blake Perkins would strike out. Bottom of the ninth, Trevor McGill would enter the game for the Brewers. He'd start by getting the first 2 outs to Isaac Collins and Michael Garcia. Bobby Wood Jr. would hit a single, then Vinny Pasquantino will be out number 3 on a flyout. Alright, so the Brewers win 8-5. The record in the regular season is now 7-2. And the Brewers' respective hitter of the game goes to Gary Sanchez. The pitcher of the game goes to Kyle Harrison.